This is the story of a 9-year-old British girl, Kate Harding. She was a bright young girl who had been spending her free time helping her mother work in their garden. It was a safe place for Kate, full of wonder and excitement. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like and share this video with your friends. Of course, the duo never expected to find anything other than old dirt and worms in their backyard, but as you might have guessed from the title, that is exactly what happened and ended up changing their lives. One fine summer day, while preparing a small garden bed in her backyard, Kate found a coin tossed in the dirt. At first, she might have thought it was a normal coin and hoped to buy herself a treat or two. Unfortunately, or more appropriately, fortunately, it wasn't. She could feel the rough edges of the coin, and it even weighed strange. Thinking nothing more of it, she stuffed it in her pocket and resumed her daily chores. At that point, Kate had assumed that the coin was nothing extraordinary and had thought of it as an old rusted relic. She decided not to tell her mother about it and instead stuffed it in one of her dresser drawers. We wonder if Kate went on to regret this, but she was only 8 years old at that time. It must have been hard since that forgotten coin would soon come back to haunt her many years later. Days turned to months and those dripped into years, and little Kate became a young adult. She was now preparing to leave the comfort of her childhood home and enter college, and during her packing found the old coin. Tangled around her clothes, the coin was still there and brought Kate back to her childhood spent in the garden with her mother. Now, as she was about to enter the real world, she cherished the connection between the coin and her playful childhood. However, the fond and cheerful memory now was tinged with a blanket of sadness since Kate's mother had passed away only several months after she had discovered the coin in her backyard. It had been years since her mother had left Kate, but still, the young girl felt her absence every day. It is never easy losing a parent, and that too at such a young age. Kate knew what she had to do with the coin. She held on to the coin in her palm. The old thing felt smaller to her now, yet somehow more significant. It was a reminder of her late mother and those warm and happy days they had spent in the garden. 14 years had passed since she had last seen the coin or her mother, and while 9-year-old Kate might have thought it was an old everyday coin, college-ready Kate had a feeling that it might be valuable. Not just sentimentally, but fiscally as well. The first step to uncovering the origin of this coin was to give it a good clean. Kate used an old soft toothbrush and warm soapy water to clear away years of grime. What she saw underneath the dirt was remarkable. It was unlike any other coin Kate had seen, and her interest was at an all-time high. She decided then to make it her mission to find out more about this mysterious coin. Strangely, Kate thought her mother would have also wanted her to find out about the coin. This drove the 23-year-old deeper into the need to discover the coin's history and who it belonged to. This little piece of metal truly puzzled her. The writing around the rim of the coin looked like nothing she had ever seen, and even the symbols seemed alien to her. She had hundreds of questions in her brain, and she needed answers, fast. Rather than using the internet, Kate decided to do it the old-fashioned way. The next day, Kate went to the town's local museum. She had hoped that she would find someone who could tell her about the history of this coin. Kate also didn't have a lot of time to find the information, since she had to leave for college soon. During the night, she tossed and turned, coming up with wild possibilities as to what the coin could be. Kate walked through the museum doors that day looking to quench her curiosity. She simply wanted to understand the history behind this piece and how had it gotten buried in her backyard. Never did she think in a million years that the coin, its location, and the answers she was desperately seeking would end up face to face with the police. In a rush to get to the library, Kate had haphazardly thrown the coin into her bag, thinking nothing of it. She walked inside, and at first it seemed like no one studied antique coins or was available. But since Kate was desperate, she asked around the library and finally found a specialist who was willing to take a look at her childhood find. After spending hours convincing them to see her, she wasn't hopeful that she would receive good news. As luck would have it, that was exactly what Kate received. The expert explained to her that this memento was not a coin, but something entirely different. He was shocked at the way Kate had stuffed this item in her bag. The big question was, if it wasn't a coin, then what was it? Was it an old, useless coin that had ended up wasting hours of Kate's time and piqued everyone's curiosity for no reason, or was it a hidden treasure worth millions? Kate soon learned that although it did look like a coin, it was a piedfort, which looks like a coin that is technically not considered one since it is thicker than a normal issue, made as a collector's item. Kay was confused. She had thought the coin would be actual money, which she could have sold for a huge profit. The expert saw her dejected face and assured her that even though it was not used as currency, it was still worth far more than she thought. It turned out that Kate's particular Piedfort was a rare artifact. Only 4 like it had even been found in the United Kingdom. This meant that historians would have paid an arm and leg for this small little thing. Everything was looking peachy for Kate. She had found an invaluable piece of history on a random day in her backyard, but a hidden storm was brewing around her, one which Kate couldn't escape it. She thought it must have been her late mother looking out for her daughter and protecting her, even when she wasn't with her anymore. It was a sentimental moment which was one Kate never forgot. Piedforts are so rare and experts have yet to figure out what they are used for. There are thousands of theories, but the most credible one is that they might have served as guides for mint workers or reckoning counters for officials. Their use in the governments of historic England might be even more valuable than the rest of the artifacts found from that time. Not just for their monetary value, but also for their historical significance as well. Kate waited anxiously as the expert searched books on books and even the internet. And then he finally had a number: 700 years old. This was a shock to Kate since she had initially assumed it was an old World War II coin. Kate's head was buzzing. As a young girl, she had a 700-year-old Piedfort hidden in her dresser drawer for 14 years, and she had no idea of its significance. She was stumped as to all the things that had to align to end up with this important piece of history. She heard all sorts of numbers, anything from $20 to going up to $1 million. After an hour or two of further research, the expert was back and he had a number. This rare Piedfort was said to be worth $3,000. As we mentioned above, it wasn't like Kate didn't need the money, but the Piedfort reminded her of her days with her mother and her carefree childhood. Just as she was contemplating what to do with this artifact, someone intervened. Her inner debate about keeping the coin or selling it was cut short when the expert notified her that she had to hand over the relic to the authorities. Kate was instantly confused. She hadn't done anything wrong. The historians at the museum, however, found it rather bizarre that Kate would rather give up a hefty sum and was being obstinate. They believed that the true caretakers of this coin were the authorities and wanted to keep the Piedfort with them. Kate's initial reluctance to let go of the Piedfort came across as a negotiation tactic to the historians, which left them rather annoyed. Since they felt they offering her good value for the object, poor Kate genuinely did not want to do to the museum's cold way of pushing her to give up her sentimental find. She decided against it and ignored their requests. She had made up her mind and had decided to keep it with her to remember her mother by. The museum continued to send her letters about it. On top of that, the staff would call her day in and day out. A few days later, she started receiving letters from the museum urging her to come back and give up the Piedfort since it had historical significance. Kate ignored the letters, but soon after she started getting daily calls from the museum staff pressuring her to sell the Piedfort to them. The situation accelerated even further when the museum took matters into its own hands and notified a South Shropshire coroner by the name of Anthony Sibsey. Again, this should have been Kate's decision to take yet again. The museum overrode her wishes. They had issued a summons for her to show up in court. Kate was confused, scared, and dumbfounded. Was ignoring calls illegal? What had she done wrong? As far as this young woman was concerned, the Piedfort was hers. This, however, wasn't true. Kate, including most people, had no idea that there was a very specific law that stated that she couldn't legally own the Piedfort was required to give it up. This was all getting a bit out of hand. Kate felt threatened and overwhelmed and felt like she needed some legal help to back herself in this murky situation. All she had done was ask a few questions, and now she was in handcuffs. This law had a very specific use, and no one had broken it in the last 23 years or more, like even heard about its existence, including Kate. All her romanticized connection with this coin was turning into a disaster story. This law is legally binding, meaning if you do surrender it to your closest coroner, you will be sent to jail. This law was meant for treasure hunters and gravediggers who would regularly deface historical properties in search of wealth. The Treasure Act of 1996 noted that a found object older than 300 years old, which contains 10% precious metals and is not categorized as a coin, must be reported to the coroner within 14 days. In the eyes of the law, Kate had become a criminal, but she wasn't even aware that she had committed a crime. For starters, she had no idea her coin was a Piedfort, or that ignoring calls would put her in jail. This was as much of a shock to the public as it was to Kate, with many community members voicing their opinions. The authorities ignored Kate's plea and had no remorse for her situation. They felt that Kate was holding on to an item that did not belong to her and was neither relinquishing her rights to it. One thing to note, though, Kate was never told of this law when she visited the museum. Kate felt trapped and helpless. But who wouldn't feel that way in her situation? All she wished for was her late mom, who had once been her constant support. Kate knew that she would have guided her to the right answer. No one, least of all Kate, was ready for what was about to happen. She got arrested, prosecuted, and was told she would be given up to 3 months in jail. The hour for uncertainty was over, and it was time to act. Friends and family gathered around Kate and helped her hire a competent lawyer out of Shrewsbury by the name of Brendan Reedy. He was charming, charismatic, and just what Kate needed. On top of that, he had vast experience in representing clients at magistrates' courts, the police station, the Crown Court, and the Court of Appeal. He assured Kate that he was not going to let anything happen to her. Regardless of this, he was completely on her side and agreed to fight for her against the authorities. But would they win the case, or would Kate be forced to give up the cherished coin that held so many great memories for her? He leaned into the fact that initially when she had found the coin, she had only been 5 years old, and even if she did know about this quiet law, there was no possible way she could follow it at the time. They both knew how tough the courts could be when they wanted something, and in this particular case, they wanted it bad. Through the cameras, Brendan had made his case, and now all they had to do was wait. Although we can all agree that this was not too smart, we have to remember how much this precious coin reminded her of her mother who had passed away. It was a childhood memento that she cherished. Her lawyer urged Kate to surrender the Piedfort despite all that had happened, but Kate was determined, now more than ever, to keep it. It was rare and beyond a shadow of a doubt very valuable. But again, according to Kate, she did not care about the money. Her main reason for keeping it was its sentimental value. For her, this was the only thing she had left of her mother. This made the object priceless. She knew that they might go after it even after she was cleared of the charges. She was free. Kate was finally able to walk free under a conditional discharge. After all of that, she only had to pay about $30 toward her legal fees. However, she still did not have the right to keep the object that she believed belonged to her. She called that ill-fated museum and took the details of the coroner at last. Kate's 14-year-long journey with this coin was coming to an end, but little did they know that she still had another surprise waiting for her. The Piedfort had gone missing. According to Kate, after the mess of the trial, she has somehow lost the item for good. It looked like it was never meant for the museum to have this relic. One neighbor said, "Since when did museums become law enforcers? I too would ignore threatening letters from a bunch of collectors." We completely agree. Thankfully, Kate's story has a happy ending. Most of her community could not believe that a lawsuit like this could even take place at all. "They took this woman to court over a coin. This is ridiculous. I'm all for preserving English heritage, but quite rightly, this is her property," one woman said. What happened to possession is 9/10 of the law," said another. Another man had this to say, "That is crazy. She found it fair and square. Why does she have to give it up?" And we completely agree with all of them. Coventry man Allen had a few questions about it. "I can't understand how she could be found guilty. If the find was in 1996, did it occur before or after the Treasure Act came into force? Can the prosecution prove the date of the find?" However, the museum was willing to do everything to get that Piedfort. It was plain that there were no limits or boundaries that the museum wouldn't cross to get it. He ended it with, "As the magistrate's appalling ignorance of the law has given her a criminal record, I think she should appeal before a real judge." We do wonder what Kate has to say about this. While we don't know how she was going to handle the criminal record, we do know that she was willing to do anything to ensure that the coin stayed with her. Many locals have an interesting theory about the location of the Piedfort. Some think that Kate still has it and she never really lost it, especially since it was something that reminded her of her mom, after all. How could she lose this piece of treasure that she had kept safe for 14 years on the day it was meant to be returned? We do not think it is likely. All we know is that if this theory is true, we do not blame her. Officially, the Piedfort is lost for good. After Kate claimed that she misplaced it, authorities finally stopped harassing this poor woman. While Kate gets to move on with her life, without the sentimental piece, another party also feels distraught. Unfortunately for the museum, they would not be able to examine the coin since its current whereabouts continue to be a mystery. However, they have put up wanted posters for it with a $3,000 money reward to whoever returns it.